Saludos everybody, welcome back to Decentshirt where we play cards from the bear decent shirts. And for today's video we have a deck profile for none other than Champions of Zeus. This deck was featured in a couple of videos ago with my feature match against Antitan. I hope you guys have seen it, because if you haven't, then you're going to want to see that before you head to see this deck profile. That being said, let's just head on to the video. Alrighty, let's just get on to our deck profile. We're going to start with none other than Rabbit. Good old Rabbit has been seen play in Thunder since the very beginning. It is basically the heart of the deck, and while we do get some new toys for the deck, we still want to abuse Rabbit as much as possible, even though this deck does not really have any Nexusers other than perhaps the counter moves. Still, it's a great card. Great use of Thunder, and just lets you build up the board that you want to get to, especially in a champion build like this one where you kind of want to get into your combo pieces. But Rabbit is great for you to get into that. Now we do also have 3 Plucky, and I know this one is a controversial take. I do think that if you're going the Champion of Zeus route, you're going to need Plucky. Unfortunately, we do play obviously our one-off Elegic, and the reason why is because this deck really relies on Zeus more than ever, and if you don't draw into your Zeus, you're gonna have to find a way to get into it really fast so that you can stay in the game. That is unfortunately one of the hiccups of this deck, and one of the things that, if you've seen the videos, the matches where basically Zeus faced off against, I think it was the Antitan deck, it just wasn't really able to keep up because many of the times it just didn't have the Zeus in hand. So that's why you do run the 4 Plucky. Now this one is for the tech cards. We haven't really finished with all the Elestrals, but I do want to talk about my choice of the techs for this deck, and that starts with one-off Electrify. I think that Electrify, it's a card that has been dismissed by many, and in this deck I think it's great because it can get you into those Champions of Zeus that maybe you're missing, or even an Elegic. And while you are giving away basically a turn and you don't really have many Nexuses to make sure that Electrify stays on the board, I do think that it is worth it. That being said, there are definitely other options that you can explore that I'm going to definitely talk about in my later in the video, where you could possibly substitute the Electrify if that's not your cup of tea. We do play 1 Quackle, another tech. I mean, this has become more of a staple at this point in Thunder decks, because Quackle is able to basically heal and make you more, let's say, resistant to stall strategies, and at the same time with Zeus, that 2 attack doesn't feel quite as bad. We do have a one-off Arcalus. Obviously we do play the Arcalus. It's the best deck for it, and it is still as strong as ever even in this deck. Even though we are not playing the Mount Olympus in this deck, you're going to see that I'm not playing Jolton, I'm not playing Race to the Top, and that's because we're forfeiting that core for the Champion of Zeus core, which we're going to talk about in a bit. So Arcalus, great card, and these are basically your non-Champion of Zeus cards, even though Rabbit could technically be considered one, and even the Elegic. The rest of the Elestrals is really all about the Champion of Zeus, so let's talk about those. We do have 3 Fulgaris. Fulgaris is an interesting card. It's a card that has a lot of offensive pressure potential, because it sort of works as the Lavalette of the deck, but at the same time you are depending on the Zeus for it to really kick off, and that's where this Fulgari starts to come up short, especially because it doesn't retain its attack during the opponent's step. So we still do need many Champion of Zeus, so that's why we are playing technically the best Champion of Zeus 1-drop. We do play 2 copies of the Champion of Zeus Titano Strike. Now, this card is actually really good. not only because of his 4/4 stats, which is really solid, and we're seeing more in Firestorm. It's also the fact that Titanostrike can search for Thunderstorm on cast, and that means that it's a removal card. It's a card that forces your opponent to either use its core against Gaze or just lose one other back row. And even if you do cast it and search for the Thunderstorm, you don't have to use it at that point. That's what's so good about it. I have considered many times playing a second Thunderstorm. However, I think one is enough just to search it when I need it, and if I just draw into it, it doesn't feel as bad. Now, the star of the show really is the Gryph-Fuse. I think that a lot of people do not talk enough about this card. This card is absolutely insane. The fact that you can lower the stats on all your opponent's field -3 in the attack area is busted, honestly. You can set up the board, and what you should really do with this deck is sort of play it slow and just build up your board to a point where you have 2 or 3 Elestrals, where you can then ascend into Gryph-Fuse and then lower the stats of your opponents and just swing with all of them, basically in theory having a +3 in all of their stats. But alas, since we are kind of running low on the Champion of Zeus package, we are technically only running 2. I would love to run 3, but I can't justify it with just 5 1-drop Zeus. And speaking of it, we do play 1 Bolt Tempest Champion of Zeus. This is basically the Gorz for those that play Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a great card. However, it really is too conditional to really play more than just 1-of. Unfortunately, I tried building a full Champion of Zeus core where you play multiple Bolt Tempest and try to pressure your opponent, but again, it's not just having the 1 Elestral that is on the board, that you can't have anything else when it is destroyed, but also you have to have the Zeus in play, and that just left the game to chance to really capitalize on the Bolt Tempest. So 1-of, since it is searchable, as we're gonna see, it's good enough for the deck. We do play, obviously, our obligatory 3 Bolt Zeus. We do need Zeus in this deck. The deck doesn't play or doesn't really move forward if it doesn't have the Zeus, so you do need to play 3. There's no ifs or buts. That's why we also play triple Plucky and 1 Elestrals, right? We do play 2 Zeus's called. This one can technically become 1, but I think 2 is decent as well. It basically, if you have Zeus in play, you are able to search for any Champion of Zeus. That means you can search for any of your 1-drops, which can then turn into back row removal. Or it can turn into a Gryph-Fuse, which can be a board wipe, or it can become a Bolt Tempest, which means that you have some sort of insurance for your opponent trying to beat over an Elestral of that Champion of Zeus that maybe you weren't able to really capitalize on in that particular turn. So Zeus's Call is really nice. Honestly, the only problem is that you need to have Zeus, much like the Fulgaris and the Bolt Tempest. So that's the main thing that is really holding back the deck, is the over-reliance on Zeus. I get the idea that Zeus had to be emblematic of the champions, and if you didn't have like Synergy of Zeus, then the title would just be something fancy worth. However, I do think that many of these cards rely too much on it, and it's no coincidence that the best Thunder cards or the best Champion of Zeus cards are the ones that don't really rely on the Zeus. So the Titanostrike and the Gryph-Fuse, I think, are the best Champions of Zeus at the moment. We do play 2 Hurricane. I mean, we do already play Thunder and Wind. We might as well play Water, play the Tsunami package, and play Hurricane, because it's never too bad. Right? And we do play, like I said, a 1-of Thunderstorm, because we do play the Titanostrike. And overall, I think this is enough removal, since you have a way to search the Thunderstorm, you have Fulgaris that can also get rid of back row, and you have Hurricane. That is more than enough removal to leave you pretty contentious in the game. We do play 1-of Earthquake and a 1-of Resting, just to have your standard removal runes, and we do play, obviously, triple Ambrosia. Now, As for the counter runes, we do play 2 tsunamis because we play water for the hurricane, so might as well play the tsunamis. We play triple hurricane, double shield, and double altar. This is just to have a solid counter rune back row, and so you're allowed to play the slow game while you search for your combo pieces, and you're able to put more pressure on your opponent. The deck is better when your opponent has to stick for the long run and is not able to really put a lot of pressure early on. That's where this deck, I feel, exceeds the best, because while it's not the cheapest deck in terms of spirit and management, it still has a lot of bang for your buck, and the more resources you draw into your hand, the more options you have, the more ways to really take care of your opponent's back row and their Elestrals all in one. So Zeus is obviously the best supporter, or the best divine in the game at the moment. So just having the best divine with a lot of great support around it makes it so the deck is really strong. Now, let's get on to the spirits.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the video so far. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that if you're enjoying the video, please like, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe so you can keep up all the great content that I'm going to be uploading in this YouTube channel. So let's get back to the video.
For our spirit lineup, we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 Thunder Spirits. Yeah, we do need a large amount of Thunders for this deck since it's so reliant on Zeus and Thunderstorm as a thing. Overall, you do need that many spirits, but it also always felt pretty good. In terms of the other spirits, we do play 3 Lycoris. 3 Lycoris has felt good enough. You do have to play strategically around it, but it's felt pretty decent, especially because you have enough for the Hurricane and the Griffuse, and if you have the Bolt Tempest, you can also do that. And you do obviously also have things that help you with that management, like the Ambushes. We do play double Leviathan. This is to complete the Hurricane package of Thunder, Water, and Wind. We do play double Tsunami, so 2 Leviathans are definitely warranted. We do play 2 Duratlas for our Earthquake, and the 1-of Luminate. Do not mind my Proxy Ballast Luminate. I just love the art, and I just kind of like went ham and printed it out. But yeah, you do only need 1 for the Pluckies. You really just want to resolve once the Plucky. You don't really realistically want to resolve Plucky twice, because it doesn't really put pressure in the deck or in the game. So might as well just run 1 so you can get it off, get the Zeus, and from there on never need another Plucky. Alright, so let's talk about our combos now. So these cards, the deck doesn't really have like a super wombo combo, nothing like that crazy, but I guess the most important thing to know is that you can play Zeus, and if you have Zeus's Scroll, once you have the Zeus, you can play Zeus's Scroll to search for anything. And what you would normally do is either search for Titanostrike to put something on the board that can still have decent stats on your opponent, even if it's in defense or attack, it doesn't matter, right? It is an immune to, not immune, but rather it doesn't care about eddies, which is a great thing to think about. The fact that you have an Elastro that can be safely put against an eddy counterplay is really solid, especially because you can add the Thunderstorm with it. So you can just choose to save that Thunderstorm. But let's say that you already have the Titanostrike in hand, then what you can choose to do is, instead of searching for the Titanostrike, you can search for a Griffuse. And this is if you're pretty sure that you have back row to protect your 1-off champion. You can start to build up the board and play towards a Griffuse handboard that can sort of wipe the opponent by lowering their stats. But another thing that you can do, and this is again all depends on the player, and the matchup that you're playing. The Suzu Skull can actually search for level Tempest. The only bad thing about this is that you're kind of telegraphing this, but other times it is not as telegraphable, especially if you don't search it, where you have your champion, you have double Tempest in hand, and if they out it and you have nothing else on the board, you are able to special cast it from the hand. It's really just a big beat stick, but it's really good at stopping like huge amounts of damage, especially because it has 14 attack, which is very, very strong for a 3-drop. And currently in the game, the 3-drops that we're seeing play are cards like Antitan, which still do not beat over the Bull Tempest if they don't have an Insectoid. Earthseers, Majorces don't really have the stats to really beat over a Bull Tempest, nor do a Majesty. So this is a really solid stat overall, and it's just like situational, but you can search it, so it's worth playing. Now, if you're going second, then you probably want to search for the Fulgaries. That way you can threaten board against your opponent. But overall, I think that the deck is more of a tempo build. You don't really have as many combos as some of my other decks where you go with Antitan and just go Antitan turn 1, or even something like the Volcaries, which we're going to see soon in a deck profile. It really doesn't overextend. It's just more like nickel and diming you one thing at a time, and the power of the effects are so strong that they are worth just doing it one thing at a time. You just gotta make sure that you can keep your resources more than lose them. Sounds simple enough, right? But in a game where the speed of the game is growing and ever so fast, it really does feel like Thunder is gonna need some new tools to really keep up. But for now, I do think that the new tools for Thunder do make it at least a little bit more interesting. So some cards to consider that I didn't really put in the deck are technically Magneros. If you want to go for more like a Zeus's Call kind of engine and more like Thunder invokes, you can play more Magneros, which would give you a Nexus. That could be pretty decent. That being said, in testing, it just doesn't put enough pressure, even though it in theory sounds absurd. The foretelling doesn't really do much, even with the Ash Rabbit. The other card that you can consider is the other Champion of Zeus, which is an interesting beater, right? It's a 1-drop that can have high stats in theory. However, when it's your opponent's turn, it really just depends on you having the Bull Tempest. If you were to build a more heavy Bull Tempest line, then I would tell you to play 3 Elestrals, because it's the perfect counterfoil to like swing really hard and then your opponent to try to beat over it, so that way you can cast your Bull Tempest. That being said, in testing, it really just didn't feel as well, and if you saw the videos, then you noticed that really it was kind of helpless without the Zeus. So again, same thing that we talked about before, like Griffith and like Bull Tempest and Fulgaries, they depend too much on the Zeus for them to be reliable. At that point, it's just better to play something that doesn't rely on the Zeus. Hence why we took out the Elechick. The Magneros on itself, also not a card that really puts a lot of pressure. Another card that you can consider is the Sparkit, the new Escape from Tartarus Sparkit, but I don't think it warrants it. The effect was nerfed enough to the point that it's really not as impressive as it used to be, and realistically you kind of want to have more Champion of Zeus, and the only way that you can start taking out is cards like the Electrofly, which is just adding more consistency, and overall it just doesn't feel strong enough for the deck. So that's why we opted to not play the Sparkit, not play Magneros, and not play Elechick, a Champion of Zeus. that will be all for the deck profile. I'm gonna move on to my final thoughts. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. I know I felt like it's kind of underwhelming. I really wanted to believe that this deck was a lot stronger, and I think in testing it started off that way, but after playing against other decks, it just feels like it doesn't keep up just quite. Maybe if it had Arcalith at 3, maybe then. But cards like the Voltempus and the Griffuse, they feel like very strong, but they're so depending on other cards that it feels like if they don't hit every single card that they need, they're probably gonna lose the game. And that's basically what's been sticking out. I've been reworking the deck because after those matches, I tried many matches and it just felt like the deck wasn't working as much as I wanted to, and as it worked originally in first testing. So for that reason, I took my time trying to restructure the deck. I added more counters. Originally it didn't have as many counters, but again, it just feels more of a thing like it depends too many on other cards for them to be really good, and it just becomes suboptimal at points. It just feels like, why am I playing these cards? I probably should play 5s, or I should probably merge other colors. And that's a real shame because this seemed like the first time that Thunder could basically go mono Thunder and it could feel powerful enough. Maybe with a Jolton package you could justify it, but at that point you're just having too many standard cores and not enough search for the cards that you actually want to see, especially because you really want to play Mount Olympus for just the race to the top. I don't think that currently in the metagame that is worth it, and you really just want to add the Zeus to hand. That's why we've ran the Pluckies instead of the Joltons. It just feels much more important to go for the Zeus than something else. So ultimately, those are my final thoughts on the deck. I'm not saying that this is like a perfect build for this deck. I've been testing with it, trying to come up with something doable, something that actually is a solid base, and these are been my results. Maybe someone will prove me wrong. I hope so. I think that this was one of the more exciting decks when it first was revealed. So I'm hopeful that someone can actually take this deck, modify it, and actually make it more optimal and actually win an event with it. I would love to see that. Anyhow, that would be all. I think that those round off my final thoughts regarding the deck. Do not forget to like and subscribe, and if you haven't watched the videos that I posted regarding the matches, I highly suggest that you do, because even if Voltempus or Champions of Zeus feels sort of underwhelming, I gotta tell you, Antitan feels pretty strong. If you haven't seen those videos, you have to check them out. Well, that will be all. Yeah, I've been signing off like 3 times at this point. Hey, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Decentshirt, sign it out.